Hello everyone, I hope you're doing well. Today we're going to tackle question 4C. You're going to write 5 different genetics problems based on some recessive genetic disorders that are found in Homo sapiens. You're going to create one question for cystic fibrosis, one question for phenylketonuria, which is commonly known as PKU. You'll write a third question about sickle cell anemia, a fourth question about Huntington's, and a fifth question about Tay-Sachs. These are all recessive genetic disorders found in Homo sapiens. So it says many genetic disorders in humans are due to recessive alleles of autosomal genes. Autosomal, what does that mean? If an allele is carried on one of the chromosomes between 1 to 22, that's autosomal. Whereas if it's carried on the X chromosome, one of the chromosomes that determine our sex, that's called sex-linked. But it's only if it's carried on the 23rd chromosome. So all of these conditions are carried on the chromosomes 1 through 22, therefore they are autosomal. So since cystic fibrosis is listed first, I'm going to go ahead and create a sample question about cystic fibrosis. So jump on Google and get some background information on cystic fibrosis. 2, maybe 3 sentences. Tell us how often it's found in live births. Is it attached to any one ethnic group? For instance, with cystic fibrosis, it's predominantly in Caucasians. In fact, 1 in 8 Caucasians actually carries cystic fibrosis. Doesn't express it, 1 in 8 Caucasians actually carry it. And then define what this is. This is an autosomal. Since it's carried on chromosome number 7, that's why it's autosomal. It's an autosomal recessive genetic disorder. It's a genetic disorder. You don't walk down the street and go, oh, I caught cystic fibrosis. Not the way it works, right? You inherit this disorder in your DNA that you receive from your biological parents. So after you've given us some background information, it's time to define your alleles. Now, it's tempting to choose C for cystic fibrosis. You don't want to do that because the capital C and the lowercase c look the same. So I'm going to grab F because the capital F and the lowercase f look dramatically different. Now, this is a recessive disorder, which means the lowercase f or the recessive allele, this is your condition. So the lowercase f is your cystic fibrosis allele. That means that your dominant F, this is your healthy allele or your typical allele. You want to stay away from the term normal. None of us is normal. We all carry detrimental alleles like cystic fibrosis, and we all have mutations. So none of us is normal. It's not the way it works. We are healthy or we are typical. And then there are certain individuals that receive 2 copies of the detrimental allele, and then they have some condition or a disorder. So then what you want to do is you want to set up a couple who are going to reproduce, right? So this is where you make a choice. I'm going to define both of them as being healthy. Do what you want. Okay? Now, since I called them healthy, we're talking about what they are physically. That's called their phenotype. And that may or may not match what they are genetically, which is their genotype. So, since they're healthy, what we see on the outside, what they are physically, that's their phenotype. Whereas what's in their DNA, what's in their genome, in their genes, is their genotype. Okay, so since they are healthy, that means that they must carry and express the dominant allele. So both the male and the female have a dominant F. That's why they're healthy. Again, what you decide to put here is totally up to you. Now, I'm going to make things interesting, and I'm going to make both of them carriers. What does it mean to be a carrier? It means that while you appear healthy, you carry the recessive allele, but you don't express it. But you can pass it on to your offspring. So, open the problem by talking about the condition, define your alleles, set up your cross. Now draw the square that we name after Reginald Punnett, the Punnett Square, after his rediscovery of Mendel's work. So you know that we carry all of our alleles in pairs. These pairs are separated during meiosis, so mom either offers her offspring her dominant F or her recessive F. The male also goes through meiosis that separates his alleles to the dominant F or the recessive F. Inside of her ovum is the dominant F. Inside of his sperm is the dominant F. These two cells join. This is fertilization. Thus, this individual, the offspring, could receive two dominant Fs. Or fertilization might receive a dominant F and a recessive F. Or the offspring might receive the dominant F or the recessive F. Or the offspring might receive two recessive Fs. These are the four possibilities for the children. Understand that the possibilities for each child is the same. If they have a healthy child, you don't check off one of these boxes and then, oh, the odds increased. It's the same for each child. Each child is a separate event. Then you need to list the ratios. The first one that you list is called a genotypic ratio. Now, a ratio is just a relationship. It's a numerical relationship is all it is. Now, when you write these relationships, you always write the homozygous dominant first. You say, what? Homozygous. Homo, same, zygous, pair. So homozygous means same pair. Well, the same pair dominant is our big F, big F. That always goes first. Then our second choice in the genotypic ratio is always our heterozygote, which is big F, little f, always. And in your third choice is also homozygous, except this one is homozygous recessive, which in this example would be little f, little f. They're always homozygous dominant, heterozygous, homozygous recessive, always. Even if you don't have any of these individuals over here, then you still list the possibility and then you simply put a 0. All right, so let's see what we have. We have a big F, we have one of those right there. I would suggest checking it off so you don't lose track. Then a heterozygote, we have two of those. We have one here and one here for 2. Then we have how many homozygous recessives? 1. So your genotypic ratio is 1 to 2 to 1. Cool. Then phenotypic ratio. You have two possible phenotypes, okay? Your dominant phenotype always goes first, and your recessive phenotype always goes second, always. You say, well, how do I know which one's which? You go back up to your alleles. Here's your dominant allele. The dominant allele causes a healthy offspring, while your recessive phenotype is someone who is sick with cystic fibrosis. Now, what's interesting about this is the individuals that have big F, homozygous dominant, and heterozygous, even though they have different genotypes, they have the same phenotype. Both of these individuals carry and express the dominant F. Therefore, all three of these individuals are healthy. Whereas this individual here is sick. So here's your here's your genotypic ratio, here's your phenotypic ratio. And then the punchline of the problem is you play the role of the genetic counselor. You get a couple that walks into your office and says, hey, we have a family history of cystic fibrosis. We've done a genetic screen and found out that both of us are carriers for cystic fibrosis. What does that mean? And as a genetic counselor, you would sit down, you would draw this out for them, and you would say, hey, you have a 1 in 4 chance. You have a 25% chance of having a child with cystic fibrosis. And they say, well, cystic fibrosis, what is that? And you say, well, it's a condition that does this to the lungs and this to the digestive tract, and the life expectancy is this, the information that you looked up on Google. All right, so that's the bad news. Always get the bad news first. What's the good news? These individuals over here. You would then tell this couple that you have a 3 out of 4 or a 75% chance of a healthy child. Now, what this couple does with that information is extremely personal. right? That's where the science ends and the TOK starts, okay? And that's a really interesting discussion. So this is a sample problem. Your problem does not have to look like this. In fact, I would suggest that it doesn't. Mix the genotypes up of your parents and or of your sample cross, and then provide the genetic counseling information to this couple. All right, so this is the sample problem for cystic fibrosis, and you're actually going to end up creating 5 different problems. One for cystic fibrosis, one for PKU, one for sickle cell, one for Huntington's, and one for Tay-Sachs, for a total of 5 questions for question 4C. Take care, everybody. Talk to you soon.